I am Pierre Lumumba here at the Kibenda Tea Estate in Limuru in Kiambu County in the Republic of Kenya, and we continue our discussions on matters Africa, and today we focus on the organization known as Boko Haram, or Western education is illegal. You know, there have been many accounts of the origins of Boko Haram, but I found the writings of a man called Gershom Adela, who writes out of Calgary in Canada, to have been the most comprehensive attempt at giving the history of the origins of Boko Haram. Adela writes in the year 2021, but he traces the history. And at the very beginning, he suggests that there have been many accounts, but he settles on one, which I believe is actually the universally accepted origin of Boko Haram. We know that in the year 1978, Malam Idris founded an organization in Jos in Plateau State in Nigeria called the Inzala Movement. The Inzala Movement was a movement that was created for the purpose of ensuring that Western civilization does not affect Islam in the northeastern part of Nigeria. It is during that period that the leaders of Boko Haram emerged. And Boko Haram was an organization that was created as the people for the movement of the propagation of the teachings of the Prophet and Jihad. And their spiritual leader is a very interesting person called Sheikh Gumi. Sheikh Gumi fought in the 1880s under the Salafist movement, which considered itself to be the purest in their articulation of Islam and the Quran. And they are of the Sunni sect in Islam. And out of that, therefore, we see the emergence, as I've already indicated, of Malam Idris. And Mohammed Yusuf, who is from Girgir in Yobe State in Nigeria, then becomes the founder of Boko Haram in the year 2002 in the state of Borno. In those early days, most of the young members of Boko Haram are drawn from the Kanuri ethnic group. And the idea is to ensure that the young people do not get afflicted, and I'm using the word afflicted very deliberately, but by Western civilization. They take the view that Western civilization corrupts and that Western civilization undermines Islam and undermines civilization, as understood from an Islamic perspective. In those early days, one sees an organization that is radical, one may say radicalized, and the idea is to radicalize young people. But as things progress, one sees the metamorphosis of the organization. And that is what ultimately leads to one of the most iconic moments in the history of Boko Haram, with the uprising in the year 2009. It is during that period that there is a major clash with the forces of the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and it covers quite a number of states. It covers Borno State, Yobe State, and Kano State. And it is during that period that Mohammed Yusuf is killed. And when Mohammed Yusuf is killed, then we see the emergence of Abubakar Shekau, who becomes the leader of Boko Haram. And Abubakar Shekau is extreme. He believes that violence must be the way of propagating the ideas of Boko Haram. And at that time, Boko Haram then begins to acquire very different characteristics. And one can therefore say that its emergence at that time and its metamorphosis is informed by a number of things. Number one, politics. Number two, religion. Number three, socio-economic circumstances. And I think it is the governor or one of the leading individuals in Kano in Nigeria, Kwankwaso, who actually orders an investigation as to what are the causes of Boko Haram. And one of the things that emerges is that poverty is one of them. During that period, you can then begin to see Boko Haram not only confined to northeastern Nigeria, in places such as Borno, which is its spiritual home in the city of Maiduguri, but it begins to spread into the neighborhood. You see Boko Haram in Niger, Boko Haram in Cameroon, and Boko Haram in Chad. And it begins to engage in activities which are no longer in line with its puritanical approach at the propagation of Islam. What one sees is an organization that is now becoming a terror organization and is soon to be characterized as such. And what happens in the year 2014 is what begins to define Boko Haram as a terrorist organization. They attack a school in Chibok and capture 276 young girls who are then taken, and many of them, even as we speak now, have never returned home. The Chibok incident is one that then sends a clear message to Nigeria and to the world and to the region that you are no longer dealing with an organization that is confined to the articulation and propagation of Islam, of the Salafist persuasion, but an organization that is now mentioning and dealing with issues which border on criminality. And that is where one begins to want to understand Boko Haram a lot more and why it continues to survive. Let us look at the political dimensions of Boko Haram. And let us remind ourselves that there are elements within the Hausa Fulani group who have always taken the view that the Nigeria as we know it should be Islamized. And Boko Haram rides on the crest of that we are fighting so that we not only ensure that we propagate Islam and Sharia law, but that we Islamize the entire state of Nigeria. They then target persons who they think are of Christian persuasion. So the political angle also begins to demonstrate that there are elements within the Nigerian forces, Nigerian political class, and even Nigerian administration and political and military class who are sympathetic to Boko Haram. And this is one of the reasons some commentators say why it then becomes very difficult to eliminate Boko Haram. When one moves out of the political environment and one goes into the religious arena, within the religious arena, one also understands that Boko Haram are confessed Muslims. But even within the Muslim fraternity, they think that they are Muslims who are not pure enough. Remember Sheikh Gumi, their spiritual leader, was a Salafist. And Salafism has its origin in Saudi Arabia, as is Wahhabism. And they are of the Sunni persuasion. So even within Islam, they are a different kettle of fish. And they are saying, we want to propagate our brand of Islam, which is what we want to spread in Nigeria. And then that gives legitimacy to their attack on some Muslims, some Christians, and even those who are not professed to be believers. And they begin to spread their wings and begin to recruit within the region. So that they are no longer only recruiting within the Kanuri ethnic group, but they are drawing membership from Niger, from Cameroon, from Chad, and some say even Mali, and some say even fighters from Libya. Debatable, but these are anecdotal issues which are told about the expansion of Boko Haram. So there is what I call the ethno-religious perspective of Boko Haram. And when one gets out of that environment, one gets into the socio-economic reasons why Boko Haram also continues to spread. How do you finance Boko Haram? Remember, it is in the Chadian basin. Lake Chad has shrunk by almost 70%. The fisher folk are no longer able to fend for themselves. The pastoralists, so they begin to engage in criminality. So you hear persons have been kidnapped. You hear that individuals are engaging in activities which are essentially designed to ensure that Boko Haram gets funds for purposes of financing her activities. And you see people not going to their farms. If you go to Plateau in areas such as Jos, people cannot plant. And for that reason, poverty also becomes a factor, and young people are recruited and get caught up in this mess of Boko Haram. Which brings us to another dimension, that while Boko Haram can be said to have been a northeastern Nigerian organization founded in Borno, in Maiduguri, as we saw in the year 2002, they are now also in dalliance with ISIS. And the split occurs. Abubakar Shekau and his group see a split within Boko Haram. They now become the province of ISIS in Western Africa. And that particular group separate from Shekau, Abubakar. They say that Shekau is too violent, and for that reason they do not want to associate with him. And the internal conflict within Boko Haram itself then does enhance and exacerbate the situation, with the consequence that they are now undermining the security situation not only in northeastern Nigeria, but in the entire region. And it is told, not yet confirmed, that indeed in the year 2021, Abubakar Shekau commits suicide when he is confronted and cornered by the Western province, which is an offshoot from the original Boko Haram. And from that point on, Boko Haram degenerates. It degenerates in the sense that it is no longer obedient to its original founding spirit, which was the propagation of the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad and jihad. It is no longer obedient to its own declared ambition that it is going to prevent Western civilization and Western education. It becomes a criminal organization. And the administration that then comes into Nigeria during the president of Muhammad Buhari then goes on an onslaught saying that this must be eliminated because this is a criminal organization. Of course, we know that that did not happen, and it's always instructive to know that despite the best intentions and the best efforts of the Nigerian military machine, fighting Boko Haram, whose activities can be characterized as guerrilla, has not been easy. So we deal with an organization which started on the face of it very innocently to fight foreign civilization, which metamorphosized over the years and which saw the emergence of different factions, which allies itself with international terrorist organization, and that has now degenerated into several little factions, and whose activities can now only be characterized as criminal, and whose agenda has been lost, so that the vision bearer of the founders has been drowned in a sea of confusion, and Boko Haram can now only be characterized for what it is, a terrorist organization whose agenda cannot be understood, and whose leaders are in a state of confusion, and whose activities are terrorizing not only northeastern Nigeria, but the entire region: Chad, Niger, Cameroon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We continue our interrogation and inquiry into things African, and today we have focused on Boko Haram, and we will come back again. Bye-bye.